there, and what you get are differences in general. The muscular-driven erections occur a lot faster. The vascular ones, the hemodynamic ones, last a lot longer. Take your pick, but it's essentially the exact same autonomic physiology.
Am I working? I believe so. Let me get my shit up. Back at it again. Here we go again.
Take your pick, but it's essentially the exact same.
I may just leave the lecture playing that I was listening to. I hope you guys don't mind that. Yeah, I think I'm just going to leave that lecture playing.
In both cases. Finally, one other thing, a factoid, a useful one we heard last week, which is insofar as there's very similar physiology to orgasms in both sexes, there's that difference in recovery time, how long it takes for the sympathetic nervous system to go back to baseline post-orgasm, and on the average, a substantial sex difference in that. Yes, everybody managed to guess it last week which direction it went, a far slower recovery time in females than in males. In terms of underlying neurobiology, something that was a major finding in the field were brain regions that differed in size depending on your gender, including in humans. And this ushered in a whole world of sexual dimorphism in the brain. And there have now been shown to be all sorts of brain regions where on the average you get differences in the size of nuclei, you get differences in the number of axons going through a bundle, a fiber, all of that. And we will hear about some more of those down the line. But the one that has gotten the most attention in terms of sexual behavior is a cluster of tiny nuclei in the hypothalamus called the INAH cluster, the internuclear interstitial.
I don't know this level yet, but I know one thing. I'm just going to try this one thing.
What that stands for, but it's a little nucleus in there, a little subset of neuronal cell bodies where you get a very substantial sex difference in the size of this area, where on the average it is about twice the size in men as in women.
We just skipped a bunch.
Back to the other week's sort of rant about statistical significance versus magnitude, this is a big effect. It is almost in the range where you can identify the sex of somebody by looking at the size of his nucleus.
I literally don't know what to do here.
In rodents, pretty much
all I know is this skip. That's all I know.
Twofold difference.
That's all I know.
Larger than females, as we'll hear.
Everything
in a
else
while,
I'm just guessing.
One really interesting exception to that. Okay, so either some areas of the brain that are preferentially involved and activated by sexual behavior, depending on your gender, or regions that differ in size substantially by your gender. But then, at the end of the day, there's all sorts of things that are absolutely in common. Again, the physiology of orgasm, exactly the same.
Where am I?
What clinically the picture is males having problems with the whole system. The problem tends to be too rapid of a transition from parasympathetic to sympathetic. In other words, the world of premature ejaculation. The more typical medical problem in women is failure of the transition from parasympathetic to sympathetic, inability to reach orgasm, and it is, of course, a huge socio-cultural, political, philosophical argument, whether that counts as a pathology or normal human variability. I'm not going anywhere near that one, but nonetheless, that is the more common pattern. Neurobiology that's absolutely in common between the sexes, which is all of that stuff at the very beginning of why are they in such a rush at the end, the neurobiology of pleasure and the neurobiology of reward and of anticipation. And
yes, I'm listening to a lecture about human sexuality. Get over it.
The role of dopamine in sexual behavior is virtually identical in both sexes, which is to say it plays a huge role. You find circumstances where you deplete dopamine from the relevant brain regions. Back to last Friday, limbic system, you remember that ventral tegmental area, which sends a big dopaminergic direction to the nucleus accumbens, which then passes it on to all sorts of places in the brain. Deplete that pathway of dopamine, and you're not going to get a whole lot of interest in sexual behavior. You are not going to get a whole lot of libido proceptivity. What's the classic circumstance where you see depletion of dopamine there and loss of proceptive libido? Clinical depression. That's one of the defining symptoms of depression amid the various numerous forms of pleasure that go down the tubes. Loss of sexual interest, one of the defining symptoms. So the dopamine system, the general term given for this is the mesolimbic dopamine system. To distinguish it from some of the other ways the dopamine is used in the brain, the mesolimbic dopamine system is absolutely central to the reinforcing aspects of sexual behavior. So what's the evidence for that? First off, back to that distinction that I think I brought up last week. I wasn't paying attention, but I think I talked about, which is the dopamine system there is not so much about reward, it's about the anticipation.
Because it's so satisfying to hit this jump, even though it's slower to keep practicing it and reloading it. Since I'm just learning this, so I'm still not even timing myself.
Okay, what you see there is the dopamine is about the anticipation. And the dopamine, as we heard, is about also fueling the behaviors needed to achieve the reward. Dopamine in this mesolimbic pathway.
It's difficult because they're shooting you, which is like boosting you and fucking with your momentum.
That is certainly the case with sexual behavior. Now there's a whole literature involving humans where you stick them in brain scanners and you do something or other sexually arousing or interesting or something or other to them, and then you see what parts of the brain activate, and it's these dopamine pathways consistently way up there, showing just how subtle this can be. How's this? You take men, there's been a whole literature by now showing that you present people in brain scanners with pornography, and that must be a really interesting human subjects release form you worked out, but showing in both sexes what you tend to see is activation of dopaminergic regions. We will hear in a little while a sex difference in that domain that will probably not surprise anyone, but how's this for subtle? You take a guy and you show him the picture of someone of the opposite sex, if he is heterosexual, and you show him the picture of this individual, and if it is someone who he assesses as being attractive, you don't necessarily get this dopaminergic pathway to activate. It depends. What this study showed was if the person is making what would pass for eye contact, if they are looking straight out, the dopamine system activates. And if they're looking elsewhere, it doesn't activate. How's that for classic male sort of responsiveness? If it looks as if this attractive person is looking at you, it activates. Even more distressingly from this study, when you show men on the average block pictures of women who they would rate as being unattractive, it's when they're looking away that the dopamine system activates. Oh my God, what is going on here? This is pitiful. What also has been shown is the exact same eye contact phenomenon of gay men looking at pictures of attractive men. Another theme we're going to see over and over, which is sexual orientation being pretty much trivial in terms of how it influences some of this neurobiology. Just switch the gender of the other individual and it works exactly the same. Now, when you look at this business about dopamine rising in anticipation of a reward rather than in response to the reward itself, it brings up one of the, it doesn't bring that up, it brings up one of the all-time interesting studies that was published about a decade ago. Okay, so the paradigm I described last week, you put on the light, which tells the monkey that, okay, we're starting one of those sessions where if you press the levers adequately, you will get a reward. And they now carry out this behavior. And as a result, they get the reward here. And as we saw, dopamine doesn't go up after the reward. It goes up at this point. This is the, I know how to do this. This is going to be great. This is terrific. Here's where you get the rise in dopamine. This is not only the anticipation, but if you don't have this rise, you don't get the behavior, the goal-directed behavior. Now, in this brilliant study, what they did was transition from a paradigm where, okay, the monkey presses the lever 10 times and gets the reward. Now what you do is the monkey works and it gets the reward only half the time. it gets only a 50% reward rate unpredictably. And what happens to dopamine? Okay, got your choice. What's your vote? It doesn't rise as much.
It rises
more.
the
exact same amount.
I know it rises more because I already...
It rises even higher.
He talked about this in a
Okay,
different
you
lecture.
guys all understand anticipation and Golder. It does this. It's one of the biggest rises you will find in dopamine in the brain short of cocaine. What have you just introduced into there? This is, I'm all over it. I know how this works. This is going to be great. I have mastery and control. I am the captain of my own lever pressing. This is all about that. What's this about? This is what dopamine does when you have introduced the word maybe into the equation. And that is incredibly reinforcing. And people will work like mad in contexts of maybe far more so than when they work in contexts of certainty. Psychologists have known this forever. This is intermittent reinforcement. You never get more behavior out of an organism than when you have introduced a maybe into it. And part of the brilliance of this study was what they then did. Now animals either got reward 25% of the time or 75% of the time. On a certain level, these are diametrically opposite manipulations. In one, you're getting more rewards, and the other, you're getting less. What's the thing they have in common? They both had smaller maybes than the 50% version, and what you see is it would look like this.
Let's get it.
100%,
I missed the fucking thing.
75, 50% maximizing the maybe. And one of the most brilliant things that various social engineers do with humans is convince people that there's a 50% maybe when it is not 50% in the slightest. That's what Las Vegas is about. That's an entire world of very smart psychologists making people think in circumstances where there's like 1/10% of a maybe going on there that is actually 50%. And when you do that, you get dopamine like crazy and you get goal-directed behavior as a result.
I hate this fucking section. This is my least favorite part of the
entire game. This is so strongly the case that this explains an extremely cynical thing that a guy I knew in my dorm back when used to say all the time. How's this for like a dispirited view of what life is like? But possibly absolutely accurate, which is a relationship is the price you pay for the anticipation of it. How's that for a grim worldview? Go figure, this guy had what a
let me just do this. Let me finish this level, then I'm going to end the stream and go play some CS:GO.
But what you see here is introduce a maybe, and it is very, very powerful. One final piece of the dopamine system here that is pertinent, which is, as we might expect from all of our molecular biology stuff, there's all sorts of different dopamine receptor subtypes. And two of them are pertinent to this world of sexual behavior and reward. One is called the shockingly the D1 dopamine receptor and the D2 dopamine receptor. And what studies show is in monogamous species, what happens is right after mating, when a pair bond is first formed,